Welcome back to today's last but not least exciting lecture session, which is entitled New Ways of Collaborating. And it is my great pleasure to introduce you to the speakers of the next hour. And the first paper will be given by Carien van Aubel and Bloser. Carien van Aubel is an independent conservator specialized in modern and contemporary art in both the Netherlands and the United Kingdom as part of the MODCON collective. And Bloser is the assistant objects conservator at the Menil collection in Houston, Texas. So welcome, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Gunnar, and thank you to Martinez for the organization. I will share my screen. Okay, welcome everyone. As an independent conservator, you can be presented with challenging requests, particularly within the art market. There are no decision-making models or codified standards of ethics that center the conservator in private practice or consider the art market as a primary client. Yet this is a common situation for the growing number of independent conservators. Where do you turn for guidance in such situations, and how do you verify you are making ethical decisions? We have online networks, forums, and conferences to exchange ideas with each other. However, within private practice, direct collegial consultation rather than advice via broader forums is often the route taken, as it feels more protected, secure, and more likely to find a balanced solution within the bespoke ethical boundaries. And I honestly would have never presented this case study on my own, as I would be too worried about being judged by my critical colleagues in the field. But after discussing this project with my fellow conservator, Bloser, we decided it is important to present this case study to show the impact of collegial consultation on decision-making in the private sector, particularly when facing the extreme pressure of the art market. Thinking about conversations I have with different colleagues, they call to mind notions of distributed networks of care and collegial consultation as evolving modes of acceptable practice in the field of contemporary art conservation 20 years in. In early September 2020, I received a phone call from a client asking if I could restore a spray-painted Caravan by Mr. Doodle. The Caravan was put up for sale on eBay by good friends of the artist. My potential client hoped to buy the piece, but wanted to be sure the Caravan could be restored before he went through with the purchase. On top of this, the client wished to disassemble the Caravan into panels, some of which he would sell to cover the cost for conservation. It was conveyed to me the artist was okay with cutting up the Caravan and restoring the panels into discrete works. This, however, was for me the first moment I realized I would not be able to make this decision on my own. In an effort to stall so I could better consider the request, I asked the client to send over more details and requested a site visit to check the condition of the artwork. It was clear to me the client was quite impulsive and that he had not thought through everything yet. On the phone, I asked if he already had someone to cut apart the panels. If not, that I could suggest a conservation technician to collaborate on the project. But after hanging up the phone, the words cutting up remained stuck in my head.
The artwork is a mobile home measuring 3 by 8 meters and approximately 2¼ meters high, and is situated in a field owned by the artist's close friends who put it up for sale on eBay. Sam Cox, known as Mr. Doodle, created the continuous scribble with spray paint on the industrial painted corrugated aluminum over the course of a few hours. He documented the process in this video that he posted to Instagram. The artist describes his drawing style as OCD, obsessive compulsive drawing, and as a growing drawing virus. He literally doodles on everything, paper, interiors, exteriors, and is most often seen in a fully doodled outfit. He is currently one of the best-selling artists on the art market, with a particular popularity in Asia. So to consider this from the outside, what are the ethical murky bits? Did the artist actually approve, or is the client rhetoric obscuring the artist's wishes? How is cutting up a complete artwork ethical? How is cutting it up for the sole purpose of selling on the art market ethical? Who should cut it? Where should they cut it? For me, these questions don't occur often within the museum context, but I imagine they are likely far more familiar to those in private practice. Codes of ethics and decision-making models are built for us in museum practice, though, and as we have repeatedly heard this past year in conferences and publications, the ethical barometer for private practice is thus guided by the sets of principles we are taught as conservators, but they must be carried out without the structure we museum conservators often enjoy. So who can actually help answer such nuanced questions for the independent conservator? In the list of stakeholders we could list for this situation, the artist, the client, the artist's friends, the gallery, an art historian, maybe an auctioneer, they are all heavily influenced by the art market. So who serves as the counter pressure? As Ashley Scott pointed out in his call for a bespoke code of ethics, conservation is regulated by the people its principles and codes of practice seek to regulate. The primary consultant as to whether or not to proceed is more often than not our colleagues in conservation. We reach out in every form of communication to each other to gauge whether or not our decisions comply with our conservation principles. Collegial consultation as a form of self-regulation. Collegial consultation as the gut check in the face of powerful stakeholders.
That day, I messaged my colleagues with whom I have the collective MODCON. The 5 of us work in modern and contemporary art conservation. We ask and give each other advice, and occasionally we collaborate on bigger projects. I have found having a group of independent colleagues with similar values to be incredibly valuable. I messaged them, I'm in a dilemma. Do I participate in this? The client says the artist agrees with the plan of cutting it up. My colleague's immediate response is, when both parties agree, it should be a fun project, but the artist must really agree. With all the murky factors swirling around this project, collegial consultation helped me identify artist approval as the central factor for ethical practice here. This is easy to see in retrospect, but in the moment of client negotiations, it is difficult to have a clear view of ethical boundaries. What are the non-negotiables? I emailed the client back to arrange a site visit and asked if the artist could be present as well. The client kept me at a distance with answers like, as mentioned before, they are best friends with the artist and I've just seen a message from them regarding his approval of it being cut up and restored. The same email, he asked if I could reduce my rates. In the following email, the client asked if I would still be willing to do the work, even if the artist would not be around. He was very persistent, reiterating that he saw the artist's approval and again repeated that the sellers put the caravan on eBay to sell. I obviously felt the pressure and I did not feel comfortable proceeding. I consulted my colleagues again and we talked out reasons to give the client for having the artist more involved. The conversations with my colleague also helped me suss out the values attributed to the caravan and the treatments. The work straddles the line of street art and sculpture, ephemeral and site-specific, and leaving the artwork in its current condition and location would likely result in a total loss anyway. Buoyed with the conversations with different colleagues, I told the client, if Mr. Doodle approves the cut plan, it would likely increase the value of the pieces on the art market, and it was in their interest to receive a written agreement from the artist for provenance. I also stated that I needed to receive proof of the artist's consent to proceed. Considering the caravan was likely to be cut up with or without me, and the condition of the surface was at a high risk of a total loss, I decided to pursue involvement with the caveat of artist approval and the hope that I could help guide the artwork through its risky future prospects. The day after, we agreed on a date for the condition assessment. So let's get to our favorite part, the peeling paint and a site visit. The caravan's condition showed how time can be unkind, especially when nestled beneath the trees. On the worst side, the caravan, weathering had caused the spray paint to fully fade from half of the corrugated and painted aluminium panels. While on site, I performed a few cleaning tests to give me an idea of a time estimate for the panel restoration. I continued to pressure the clients for formal artist approval to cut up the panels. Initially, I suggested they retain the integrity of the existing panels on the caravan, with only a few cuts, as seen in pink here. I also suggested they use a conservation technician to do the work rather than a general contractor. Happily, they acquiesced with artist approval and created a cut plan for the artist to sign. I was a bit overwhelmed by the amount of cuts they proposed in the end. They did not take my advice of basing cuts on the original panel configuration, but they did agree to hire Ben, my conservation technician, to perform the cuts. I didn't think actually also that the artist would agree to so many cuts. This is the cut plan overlaid on one side. I again reached out to my MODCON colleagues for advice. I shared the cut plan with them and their first reaction was also, whoa, that's a lot of panels and a lot of work. What is the artist's opinion about it? I realized I could either push for artist approval or push to change the cut diagram, but it was unlikely to achieve both. The clients did not want me involved in making the cut diagram. I surmised this was an entirely financial decision. My colleagues recommended I let the cut diagram be what it is, as long as the artist signs and approves. It was an uneasy decision, but was slightly assuaged by the fact that Ben would be involved in the disassembly process, and I knew the process would be done with care. The clients continued to stall in providing us the official artist approval. So Ben and I agreed we would proceed with the organization of the materials and equipment, but only move forward with the disassembly until we saw approval. The artist signed the cut plan without modification, to my surprise. And in retrospect, I realized the force of the art market was stronger than any argument I could make about the integrity of the original panel arrangement. Indeed, the artwork is in doodles, not necessarily in the Caravan's original panel construction. A colleague said to me, perhaps it feels funny because it's for the art market. The art market has always had a dirty connotation to it in my training, that it was an evil force we needed to counter and resist. But I found when I stopped resisting and understood factors at play, I could better advocate for the artwork and my own conservation principles. The client proposed we film a documentary about the process in the restoration. I realized it was a tool for them to prove authenticity of the panels and validate the restoration work done to them for the art market. It was ultimately never released, but was an interesting pivot point to the clients valuing my work as a conservator. This work took 6 months to complete, yet the total revenue of the job accounted for 1/3 of my total revenue that year. As an independent conservator, I'm running a business that needs to make money to continue to operate. About 50% of my business is directly involved with the art market. As independent conservators, we hold the front line for conservation principles in this high pressure environment, and we are often the first conservators clients have ever encountered. I want it to be a good encounter. We want the art market to conclude us rather than stepping around us. I think the work of contemporary art conservation today is indeed becoming a collaborative partner in the art market, in the stages prior to an artworks museum life. And to take it further, I was able to say yes, to be included in this process because of my bespoke network of care and my collegial consultation with other conservators.
The restored doodle panels were put up for auction at Christie's in Hong Kong in a rare dedicated sale, and the artist is now represented by Pearl Lam Galleries in Hong Kong. Carien's restoration of these panels occurred at the tail end of his unrepresented artist career, and is probably the last time a piece of his will be sold on eBay rather than at Christie's or a gallery floor. Contemporary art conservation, whether in private practice or within the museum, deals with the art market as an ever-present force. While 20 years back, we may have scoffed at this and said the art market should not be a factor in our decision-making, nor considered in how we approach artworks before us. We can now see such an approach is simply inaccurate, a notion more aligned with the head in the sand idea of conservation as objective or neutral. Can we ignore the art market force and still claim transparency and accountable subjectivity in our field? If we actively recognize the art market as the proverbial elephant in the room, how can we better build principles for ethical practice or decision-making models that center independent conservators, ones that recognize the art market to be a principal stakeholder in broad daylight and not a side concern or swept under the rug? I think 20 years later, we do this on a bespoke level, but have not yet found a way to do it on a broad forum. Within our broad bespoke networks of care, ethical boundaries are checked back and forth with colleagues in the field. It's that chat group of graduate classmates or conference colleagues that helps you to check your gut, to check your approach. Bound into a community with strong ethical standards, collegial consultation is a standard of practice, especially when facing these powerful forces like the art market.
The artist posted about the sale on his Instagram, which was a huge validation for me, although he remarks in his post that the works were not sold by him. I don't know if he means he didn't make any money from the sale or that he wasn't involved in the project. I hope the former. I have an artist questionnaire out to the artist, but with his new gallery representation, I'm still kept at arm's length.
Our aim for this presentation is to advocate for a greater recognition of collegial consultation as a voice of authority in conservation decisions. This is particularly evident in private practice, where a fellow conservator is often the only stakeholder that can provide autonomous advice based on shared ethical principles in the face of a powerful force like the art market. Recognizing the art market's active role in our profession will help us to counterbalance and develop guidance and techniques for operating within it. There is also a need for more space for independent conservators to present their case studies that involve the art market, so that we might begin to build a moral casuistry, as Van der Waal calls for, an approach that uses case studies to help a network of practitioners develop guidance for practice. It is in recognizing the bespoke networks of care that we are all actively building that our bespoke ethics of care can be developed, reviewed, and practiced.
Thanks to everyone I consulted on this project, and thank you all for listening.